Hello, Russ of Aquariumax here, and we're having a little bit of a logistical issue with the guest for today. I'm not sure if we'll be able to connect or not, but I figured we'd start off with the live stream, and if we're able to connect, great. And if not, we'll just have a live stream anyway. And it sounds like someone's alarm's going off. I might have to address that. So I apologize for the false start. I'll be right back. Okay. Sorry about that. Yeah. Let's see. I'm going to check in the chat. I've been chatting along with some of you there. And I see WD is there. Random T came in. Zero Cool. Awesome. There's Young Lad, Evan G. And Javi was here before. So was Frank and Mantis God, Mr. and Mrs. Morelia, Bradley Humphrey. Who else? Canal Side Exotics, Wendy Hickson, Tim Bow. Hopefully I got everybody there. Tara is here. And London Jade, Michael Hare, Vicabulous, Saguaro Blossoms. Awesome. And there's Ashley Nebel. Well, like Spike's a great idea. And thank you, Saguaro Blossoms. The background. I really like this background too. Oh, we got all kinds of noise going on today. I think my wife left her phone charging over in the corner there. Let me just go deal with that. I thought it was silenced and it was not. So sorry, everybody. Off to a great start today, right? Let's see. Mark C. Lemon is here. And Zero Cool. Yeah, how are your isopods doing with your tracking number? Are they about there? It seems like, let's say, Tuesday. So they should be here pretty soon. Probably not. Probably tomorrow or the next day. Oh, and Dope Critters left us a super chat. Awesome. And we'll just count that Dope Critters towards last week's super chat party. It was pretty awesome. So we'll just consider that that's part of it. And so does Exotic. Massive P. Lavis orange guy here. Awesome. They are beautiful. And Zero Cool. Okay, they're going to arrive by tomorrow. That's great. That is awesome. You've got quite the group of isopods coming. So I hope they're all doing well. Temperatures have been better for shipping lately, and I have been less worried about it. For a long time I was just saying, everybody, if you're going to do shipping, really you should do express. But now it's not quite as bad, depending on where it's going and stuff. Sean Meister is here, and a super chat from Javi Strange Pets. So thank you. Javi, am I saying that right? Did I say Javi? Because I've known of people with that name, and that's how they pronounce it. I just want to make sure I do it right. So Slav Pepe used ostracods, scuds, copepods, and detritus worms as my base cleaning crews for my aquatic setups. Yeah, I have used all of those myself in aquatic setups. I think they're great. The only one that I sometimes have slight issues with are the scuds in planted tanks where there's nothing to eat the scuds, keep them under control, but they do a great job. They just sometimes nibble on the plants as well. But as long as there's something in there to, eat some of them, then they usually do great. And Ashley. Oh, Ashley's going to Ontario tomorrow, but it'll be in the 20s. Yeah, probably not very many isopods you'll find in those temperatures, although there are some that will be in the high, that'll show up in the high 20s, like is it Porcellio spinicornis will sometimes show up walking around on the snow. I don't get those around here. I don't see them, but I've heard that people will find them in snow when it's like 26, 28 degrees, something like that. So DIY fly proofing. So Tom, that is an intriguing question. So are you talking about fly proofing in terms of keeping fruit flies inside an enclosure? Or are you talking about keeping, say, fungus gnats outside of an enclosure? Let me know a little bit more about that, and we'll see what we can do. And Zero Cool, we're having a reptile show April 1st in El Paso. Can't wait to pick up a few spiders. Awesome. What kind of spiders are you talking about? Like tarantulas, jumping spiders? What are you looking at? Canal Side Exotics from Ontario. Cool. Oh, theropod hunters in here. Ford. Okay. So Ford, are you asking about the expo in Sandy, the Mountain America? It's the Reptilian Nation one in the city of Sandy in Utah. Is that one you're talking about, Ford? Jackson Manning, hello. Good to see you here in the chat as well. Oh, Bradley Humphrey leaving us a super sticker. Wow, that is awesome. Bradley just killing it with the super stickers. Wow, that is so fabulous. I don't even know what to say. Except Bradley, you are fabulous. That is awesome. So let's see. So temperatures in the 80s and 90s. Yeah, that's a little bit warm. In the 80s, I'm not too worried because I pack them. I can do cold packs. 90s, yeah, it depends. If it's express and I do cold packs and I do the foam packs and everything, probably okay. But if it's not the high 90s, if it's low 90s, probably okay. Slav Pepe, seen Portobello Mushrooms just walking around inside the access halls at my work. Those guys are hardcore. Yeah, they are. And okay, Ford, probably going to be there. Not vending this time. Things are just too crazy. I was offered a table and thought about it because I think that would be cool. But I will not be vending. But I might show up. If I do, probably show up with my wife just for a couple hours to just kind of walk around. But when I get there, I'll probably like post on Instagram and stuff, say I'm here if anybody wants to come say hi. I'd love to talk to anybody who wants to come say hi. That's one of the big draws for me at a reptile expo is just to get to meet people that watch the channel and stuff like that. It's fun to be able to talk to you and meet you and just kind of chat about your isopods or your reptiles or whatever you want to chat about. I enjoy that. I will be for sure at the Wasatch Reptile Expo at the end of April. I think it's the last day of April. It's a Saturday, and I will only be there the Saturday. I won't be there the Sunday, but I will be there with an educational table. So if you are going to be in the Salt Lake area at the end of April, those of you who are locals, whatever, I'm going to be there. It's going to be an educational table, so come by and say hi. I'm not selling anything. Just I'll bring some critters to just look at and talk about and whatnot, and just chat with people. I enjoy doing that. The educational table is a fun thing for me so that we have a chance to do that. So Cylindria lulis punctatus, the blunt-tailed snake millipede, part of the community. Do you know of anyone who keeps them? I don't personally know, but that sounds pretty awesome. Blunt-tailed snake millipede is something I got to see. Yeah, I don't know about that one. Yeah, Sean Meister, it's true. YouTube does take a cut. It definitely helps. And Clognog's in the house. So Zero Cool, you don't need a permit to sell at the expo because it's in your state. Unless you travel. If you travel to another state as a vendor to sell, I guess you would need a permit. But if I go to my local expo, I don't need permits because they're, it's in my state. It's all about crossing state lines. Now, I don't really have any control over whether somebody comes from Idaho and buys isopods from me and takes them back to Idaho. That's their thing. And technically, they would need a permit for that. Okay, so Tom Mills, you're talking about fly proofing the inside of the vivarium. Medical tape wrapped around the inside edges of the doors and layers to close the gaps and tape the sides. Still escape. That sounds like a pretty decent method. Now, do you have, if there is screen, like window screen, grade screen on the enclosure at any point, like up at the top, they're going to get out of that. So if it's like an Exoterra that comes with that stock, they're going to get out of it. So tell me a little bit more about that. Is that what you have? Because you might need to put some ripstop, what do you call it? Some no-seam mesh on top of that screen in order to keep them from coming out. And forward. Yeah, totally get that. And it would have been great if I had been vending this time. I just couldn't do it. Too much going on. too much going on, so I wasn't able to pull that together in time. But I would have loved to have helped you out with some isopods and springtails. Oh, yeah, so Ford, you were at the last Wasatch show. I'll definitely be bringing some of the same stuff and some of the different stuffs. But yeah, the magnifying glass, the kids really love that too. Okay, Finn Ice Bear, hello. So, Javi, the guest, I think, is having some problems accessing or something, or we got the time messed up. I'm not sure what's going on because we had been communicating about this for a while and everything seemed okay, but we're not able to connect, and I'm not sure what the reason is. If it doesn't work this time, I'm sure we'll set it up for another time. So what I think I will do, rather than stealing the guest's thunder too much, but it's in the title, I guess, is probably I'm not stealing a whole lot of thunder. This guest had a multi-species bioactive setup for more than 2 years and has some stuff going on in there that's kind of amazing. So we're going to talk about that, but let's talk about that more. So paint strainers for gnat proofing, Evan G. Tell us about that. Paint strainer, where do you get that? Do you just go to a paint store and pick it up? Okay, so Tom Mills, you've got the stock screen with plastic wrap taped around the sides of the top as well. Wow. And what about the cord access in the back? Is that all taken care of too? And there's 503. Excellent. So, Slav Pepe, you saw a bright red wolf spider, bright red centipedes, and a blue carnivorous snail. Cool. So, can you remind me which part of the world you're working in? Bright red wolf spider. In Europe, I'm wondering if you saw a ladybird spider, possibly. There's areas in Europe that have those. So, Mr. and Mrs. Morelia. Thanks for the super chat. And I'm reading your question here. Pet peeve, redoing isopod bin and moving little delicate creatures, worrying about hurting, losing, burying them. Not just you. I always feel the same way. I always feel super bad about dealing with isopod bins as far as redoing it. Whether if I'm splitting it, I don't feel so bad because I take half the substrate from one, half the substrate from the other very carefully. And there's still a possibility of hurting them, but less of an issue. I don't really feel too bad about burying isopods in the depth and the type of substrate we're using because it's not super heavy. And I feel like isopods that get buried are fine. They just unbury themselves. But possibly springtails they tend to unbury themselves too, in my experience. I do worry about hurting them, about losing them. And especially when I have to take substrate out, I often try to set that substrate aside in another bin and let that kind of go for a while to see if other isopods will come out and that kind of stuff, grow up a little bit and then I can take them out. But, it does bother me. It still does. It's like the worst thing about keeping isopods is that you have to discard that substrate. And at some point you have to say, okay, I've gotten everything I possibly can get out of here, but there's probably something left in there and you have to dispose of it, which I hate. So yes, I'm with you, Mr. and Mrs. Morelia. Okay, Tom. So trying to be cost effective, finer screens of glass. Okay. Yeah. It sounds like you're doing all the right things. You can do the thin bead of silicone along the edges of the door. You wrap the door itself in plastic wrap, do a bead of silicone so it comes and touches where the plastic is. And then after it dries and cures, you peel off the plastic wrap carefully. And then it's like a lip that goes right up to the glass. It's anyherpeticulture.com has probably a better explanation of that method. And it works pretty well as long as the silicone lasts. After a few years, usually the silicone kind of fails and you have to start over. But that works. But I really like this paint screen idea. So, Tom, that may be a direction you want to look. Okay, so Ford, you have Bioactive with your geckos and their 2 adult toe case. So tell me a little bit about the floor footprint and the type of isopods you've got in there, or the number of isopods you've got in there. Okay, Ontario, Canada is not going to be a ladybird spider then. Big red spiders, huh? I would love to see a picture of this. That sounds really cool. And Frank, I couldn't agree more. Thank you for the donations, everyone. Really do appreciate that, everyone. It makes a huge difference. There's a lot of associated expenses, as you know, when you have things like this going on. You're trying to run a channel, and it really, really helps. Let's see. Oh, so Tom, yes, definitely check out anyherpeticulture.com, and they have a fly proofing, like a written tutorial kind of thing about how to do that. And yes, 503 and Random T. Centipedes do tend to eat isopods. At least a lot of different types of centipedes do. And it depends on the type. I mean, geophilomorph centipedes probably are not that big of a threat to isopods. But the Lithobius porficatus, which are a species that arrived in the U.S. from Europe, they live all over the state. They live all over the country pretty much, and they will eat isopods, definitely. So watch for that. And I think the deep substrate is not necessarily a problem. I do think zebra isopods, probably not the ideal species for a bioactive with toe case for a couple of reasons. One is because they're just not, they're decent breeders and so on. They're not the most, say, protein hungry and so on. You get some other isopods that are a little bit more voracious. They might actually handle a little bit more of the feces. They can do a decent job for sure. But with tokays, I mean, they're big geckos, big appetites. They're eating insects, and they're going to be producing a lot of feces. And you'd have to have a really large number of zebras to do that. I'm thinking something like Porcellonides pruinosus, or even like dairy cows. I don't think, I think tokays would probably eat dairy cows, but I think they're probably picking up some of the zebras too. So WD, how do you say your last name? Kieft? Is that how I'm doing it? Is that how it's pronounced? I freeze the substrate for 72 hours. That is the guidance I got from the APHIS, the American Plant Health Inspection Service. Freeze it for 72 hours. I'm kind of jumping back and forth on the chat here. Mr. and Miss Morelia, that's a good idea. You save the old substrate like I often do. I will save it for a while and see if more isopods show up. And ooh, we got one from Corvus Music. Thank you. Happy Wednesday to you, and I appreciate the super chat. Granulatum, good for cleanup crew. I haven't tried granulatum in a cleanup crew, but pretty big and robust. Oh, the Slav Pepe, you found the big red spider, woodlouse hunter spider. Yeah. They are kind of reddish, aren't they? They have a reddish sort of cephalothorax and red legs, and then the rest of them is kind of a paler color. But yeah, I guess that makes sense. Yeah, and Ford, you're right. You have a fair number of zebras in there. That's good. But if you put Oreo crumbles in there, they almost certainly will outcompete the zebras, as you suspect. One thing you can do, though, just think of things you can do in terms of microhabitat to maximize the areas that zebras can use. One thing I was thinking is that humidity is probably not too much for the zebras, as far as because there's going to be enough ventilation in an enclosure like that. It'll be fine. But I don't know. It might not be ideal for them, as zebras, as far as that goes. And Shankly, oh, awesome. You have blue death fanning beetles living with your leopard gecko. 1 male, 5 female. What kind of substrate you have in there? Are you seeing any larvae? I'd kind of expect it. And Mr. and Mrs. Morelia, that's a good point as far as the tokay poop goes. I haven't kept tokay, so I didn't know they usually went in the same area. So as far as the Flex Seal, I don't know. I haven't used that. But when you're using, well, no, somebody else already said that. can you keep a non-venomous arachnid in New York City? I don't know the rules. I know they have some funny rules there, but I don't know exactly what the rules are. So 503, you have a ton of bioactive ready arid substrate. No isopods or springtails on it, used for Kenyan sandbar. Sand and excavator clay, compost, and compost. Are you raising any feeders? Because there's some feeders you could raise in that if you don't have another use for it. I'm thinking if I had a bunch of that around, I'd probably raise some superworm beetles in it. Because if it's deep enough, you can raise a ton of superworm beetles in it. I raise more superworm beetles than I need, just pulling adult beetles periodically out of my leopard gecko enclosure and putting them in other enclosures, and they just produce loads and loads of babies. So I have been tempted to try death feigning beetles with our Leo, but I'm just not sure she's going to eat them. The leopard geckos vary widely in their tastes. Some of them are not picky and will munch down superworm beetles, and others don't like them at all. Ours doesn't like to eat them at all. So there you go. But there are leopard geckos that will munch the beetles despite the smell. And theropod hunter, you blue death feigning beetles, you probably don't need to necessarily put anything else in the sand if you're just keeping them. If you're breeding them, I would say you need a more varied substrate, but if you're just keeping them, they're probably fine on that. Ford got this foam ball looking mold. Oh, I think I know what you're talking about. Bio balls about 1.5 to 2 inches. I'm hoping to save with adding isopods, not have to start over. Okay, and are there a ton of springtails in there, Ford, too? Let's see, Clognog, hoping to find some blue death feigning beetle larvae soon. None yet. I hope you get it. I hope you get some. So using Arcadia Earth Mix arid setup for almost 2 years now, said they have not seen any worms. And how dry is it, Shankly? Because this is what I've discovered with the blue death feigning beetles. If the substrate is too dry, the eggs will hatch usually and then die. So you have to have a part of the substrate that's kind of deep enough and has some moisture underneath, a kind of substrate that holds moisture underneath but is dry in the top, because you don't want it to be too moist, especially not on the top for the beetles, but you want it to retain some moisture underneath. If it does, the substrate retains that, you'll get the larvae just hatching and living. And so hopefully that helps. So Javi, anybody know about vinegaroons in New York City? They're non-venomous. They can just spray acetic and caprylic acid solution. So that's... And Crystal's Pets and Plants is in the house as well. Excellent. Okay, so your millennial mother, good chime in there. So you should be okay with a vinegaroon in New York City. Dope critters. Short video, my king snake fighting a dairy cow over a pinky. Dairy cow got a couple pinky bites and decided to give up. Probably wise. And I'm assuming this is a very young king snake if it's eating a pinky. So that's got to be a funny video. Do you have that on your channel? So Mantis God, what kind of desert beetles do you have? I've noticed my Iliotis tend to drink a lot of water. And also my superworm beetles will go right to the leopard gecko's water dish and just drink and drink too. So Clognog, is your vinegaroon still underground? They do tend to molt while they are still underground. So hopefully it is going to molt soon. They tend to molt during their hibernation, if you want to call it that. Depends on the little water pond right now. Okay, so Iliotis beetles, Mantis God. I do love the Iliotis. I've got some really big ones. I can find Iliotis obscurus right here. Just go up in the hills and catch them on the hiking trails. There's a ton of them, and there's also Iliotis hisperlabris, I think. And I get some pretty big ones. But Peter and Jesse at Bugs in Cyberspace sent me a gargantuan one, the biggest one I've ever seen, and it's awesome. A couple of them they sent, but one of them is even bigger than the other, so they're pretty awesome. So Shankly, you may need a damp area somewhere else. Yep, you might do that. So forward might be too dry at the same time. I add more moisture. I'm starting to see those little green balls against the glass spread. Yeah, springtails may help if you don't already have them. Worth a shot anyway. Okay, so clognog, yeah, you have a pretty good chance that it's going to be molting. You might want to try, if you can see it being fat, here's the thing. Some invertebrates respond very well to complete darkness when it's time to molt, and some of them can't even molt until it is completely dark. So if it's like buried itself, but it's up against the glass in a chamber and you can see it, you might want to try putting some black paper, or a couple layers even of black paper up against that area where you can see it, so it gets darker in there. And that can sometimes kickstart some invertebrates. I'm not sure if it works with vinegaroons or not, but worth a shot. Oh, and there's Heather Jensen. Hello and welcome. So I can never tell when I'm doing a live stream with StreamYard, which is what I'm doing now because that's what I use for guests. I can never tell how many likes we have. I can see how many people are in the chat and stuff, but I can't see how many likes. So if somebody can tell me how many you see, that would be awesome. And Night Wolf plays. What do you think the fastest reproducing isopods are? In terms of just per unit volume, how many isopods you can get fastest? Probably Porcellus laevis dairy cow, and maybe Porcellus laevis milkbag on the same level. So if you want to produce X pounds or X kilograms of isopods in a limited amount of time, those would be the ones I'd go to. Random T Titan beetle in person. Oh, thank you, Tara. So we got 29 likes. Not bad. So your millennial mother, you don't necessarily need to provide water in a shallow water bowl with your blue death veining beetle. I don't. I do spray a corner every week or so, and they do have a velvet ant water in there with some nectar in it, and they probably drink some of that. I don't really see them doing it too much. The other beetles I see more. But with the beetle jelly and any other moist foods, like you're putting bits of carrot or whatever in there, and spraying one corner, you're good. You don't need to use a water bottle. Okay, so Mantis God, you have Iliotis, blue death veining beetles, superworm beetles, diabolical hellburnt, ironclad. Oh, I love those. I have diabolical ironclads, but not hellburnts. Single mealworm beetle and this other dude that's super small. Not sure what it is. Is it possibly Mantis God and Agroporus? Smaller than a mealworm beetle, similar shape, maybe a little thinner. Maybe a little reddish tints to the legs, an Agroporus red-legged tenebrionid. I love those. Peter at Bugs in Cyberspace has provided a couple of those to me, and I think they're awesome. They're really active, even during the day. So how these strange pets? How do you care for vinegaroons? Well, vinegaroons, like a deep substrate, a substrate that's not going to collapse on them, can hold some moisture, but not too much. And so one mixture that people use is play sand mixed with cocoa fiber. There's other mixes. Something like excavator sand can be a good addition. There are some other options out there, but it's something that needs to be able to retain some moisture, but not be soaked, because you don't want to be soaked. But they also want to be able to build burrows that don't collapse. They're very important. One thing you can do to facilitate that is put like a slab of cork bark, kind of wedge it into the ground at like a 45-degree angle so it can get under there, or even experiment with other angles and put some slabs in there so they can burrow under them. I'll put a small water dish in there, make sure there's plenty of ventilation, and feed them things like crickets and superworms and whatnot. Don't overfeed them. They don't eat a whole ton. They don't have to eat super often. And they'll go on hunger strikes and just not eat for months if you overfeed them. And in the winter, you need to let them, generally, if they do this, they don't always do it, but let them burrow down, and they'll hibernate for months and months sometimes. So, and Ford, I would totally add springtails to it. Add as many springtails as you can practically get in there. Try to encourage them to grow. The mini centipedes, depending on what species it is, it's hard to say. Some of them could eat springtails, definitely. Others might eat isopods, some might eat both. So I'm not sure what you've got there. If you've got the Lithobius forficatus, the small ones, baby ones, will probably eat springtails, and the adults will eat isopods. So, okay, Ford. Yeah. When you put it all together at once, it's not ideal. It can work, but as I think you already know, you can't really put them all together and expect the optimal results. You generally want to get the plants and then add springtails and isopods. Probably springtails, wait a while, add isopods, wait a while, then add the macrofauna. And I think you know that. Sounds like the designer didn't. So Heather Jensen. So my orange Portobello laevis are slower than my dairy cows too. I agree. I'm getting the same result. Very different in activity levels, very different in reproduction. And they might not be the slowest, but they're certainly not very fast. The orange Portobello laevis are much, much slower. So totally agreed. We have the same experience there. And Mantis got, okay, you've got a small banana-shaped water dish, small aquarium rocks to make sure they don't drown. The small aquarium rocks are a good idea. And Bradley, 16 likes, 20 watching. Yeah, that's kind of funny. There is some kind of glitch going on there. So can I spell it? Mantis got it. What can I spell? Sorry, I'm behind. So just remind me of what I'm spelling. What's the outcome of combining Peacekeeper, Spanish orange, and orange koi? Okay. Takshish, I don't know, Takshish 11. I'm not sure how I'm saying that. This is, okay, Peacekeeper orange, orange koi. What you'll get the first time around is probably more orange, more Spanish orange. They just look like Spanish orange. And then in the next generation, you'll get some orange koi and some Spanish orange. They are both, the koi is a single gene recessive trait in the oranges. And so orange koi got their orange from the Spanish orange stock. And so the koi is another mutation that causes the irregular patches of white. So like I said, you cross them, first generation, you'll get just what look like Spanish orange. Second generation, you'll get some hets and you'll get some koi and you'll get some just homozygous for orange. And so 503, your orange laevis breed like bunnies, so just like the dairy cows. I'm sometimes wondering if there are different lineages out there of orange laevis, to be honest. Wondering about that. Apex Geckos, welcome. Started watching the Bioactive Species series and figured out you're streaming. Well, welcome. The great timing. And if you have questions, feel free to jump in with those. I'm happy to help. Every few weeks for my blue death veining beetles. You go mad for a very strong smell. Awesome. Well, anything that you can get the blue death veining beetles to munch on, it's good. Some variety is good for them, so that makes sense. I do have a Patreon question from Truffle Pig 42. I'd like to cover that. Truffle Pig says, is there a frequency with which you reinfuse cultures of microorganisms? If so, what do you use and at what interval? I have something from Josh's Frogs that I more or less add every once in a while when I think of it. I think that is a great question. To be honest, I don't really reinfuse a culture with microorganisms once I've got it started. I feel like I do the infusion at the beginning, and as long as the substrate is healthy, I don't really need to reinfuse it because they should be doing well on their own, I'm thinking. But, oh, we just got some more super chats. Holy cow. We got a lot of super chats, and I missed some of them. Bradley, I just saw your super chat for $99. So I'll be definitely covering that. I'll come right back to that in just a second. So I don't really infuse cultures with microorganisms because I feel like I do it at the beginning with a section of, say, sphagnum moss full of springtails and some of the substrate from a previous enclosure. And then once I need to do it again, all I'm doing is pulling out some of the old substrate and putting in new substrate, and the old substrate infuses the new. So that's my answer on that one. Hopefully that's clear enough. I think that's how I do it. So Bradley Humphrey, I've got to address your super chat, and I'm going to address all the super chats. So I'm going to catch up. So this is fantastic, Bradley. I really appreciate it. Very, very generous of you. And he says, have you ever kept any kind of diving beetles, Russ? I was thinking of trying them out. I'm trying to think back. I think I've had some diving beetles once in a while, but it's just been when I was a kid was the last time I had diving beetles. So I don't remember a whole lot of specifics, but I will tell you something. If you haven't checked out Peter's latest video on his channel, Bugs in Cyberspace, he's got these awesome sunburst diving beetles. They're absolutely gorgeous. Have these yellow spots on. They look kind of like the gestroi of diving beetles, the Armadillidium gestroi of diving beetles. Seriously, that's what they look like to me. They're big, they're active, super easy to take care of. He says he gives them fish food pellets and they eat those. He'll give them fruit flies on the surface of the water. They'll eat those. They don't seem very particular. He's actually trying a captive breeding project. He says they need to come out on land to lay eggs. So he either recently put, or he's just about to put, I don't quite remember, a land area in his big tank full of the sunburst diving beetles to see if he can get them to lay eggs. And so I would, if you're interested in doing some diving beetles, those are some of the most gorgeous diving beetles I've ever seen, to be honest. They're not huge, but they're not tiny either. They're, comparable in size approximately to Armadillidium gestori, interestingly enough. Maybe slightly smaller than the maximum size for adult Armadillidium gestori, but it's hard to imagine a diving beetle that is easier to take care of and more attractive. So that's my advice. I wish I could give you more information on it because I don't remember a lot from when I was a kid keeping them, but what do you think? All right, Hobby Strange Pets. I got $4.99 super chat. How many times a week do you feed vinegaroons? Friendly and awesome community. Totally agreed. It's amazing. This community is fantastic. Do you feed vinegaroons you can feed them approximately once a week, but like I said, sometimes they'll go on feeding strikes, and also depends how many you feed, what you feed it at a time, and what size, and how old the vinegaroon is. Like a younger vinegaroon, as it's growing, you want to feed it more often. Also, in the warmer months, they tend to eat more. They'll eat a lot less when it's cooler. Also, how fat the vinegaroon is getting, a lot of things like that. So I usually try to feed, and I don't have any currently, but I kept in the past. Try to feed them about once a week, and if they weren't interested in eating, I'd just remove the food pretty quickly. That was kind of my way to do it. Okay, Mrs. Morelia got a super chat here from them as well. Appreciate the live stream, guest or not. No complaints with just rust time. Your knowledge and awesome community are what we're here for. Well, I appreciate that. And look, I see Alex. Alex is our guest. Just speaking of that, there's our guest. So I'm going to try to let Alex in. Here we go. Oh, the beetle is, I think it's Agroporus or Agroporus with an I, maybe something like that. I'm going to try to let Alex in. Here we go.
Hello.
Right. Hello, Alex.
Great.
How's it going?
Pretty well. How are you?
Doing okay.
Great.
I'm glad you got the logistics to work. This is great.
Yeah, it was actually pretty simple. I just got the time zone screwed up for some reason. I don't know what I was thinking.
Oh, that's what was happening. I was wondering if it was the time zone. Okay.
Yep.
Cool. Well, let's jump into it, everybody. Welcome, Alex here.
Hey, everybody.
And Alex has a really interesting setup going on. He's got it's a multi-species bioactive, right?
Mm-hmm. That's right.
So can you tell us a little bit about what you got going?
Oh yeah, so I'm pretty new to the hobby. This is my first enclosure. It's just a crested gecko. Got it from PetSmart. But I wanted to try some different things with the bioactive element of it. So I threw in a bunch of different species of isopods. Got springtails in there. I threw in some worms, just basic red wriggler worms, and some shiitake spores. Just because I wanted to sort of more closely emulate the natural environment in a way. That was my idea anyway. So just been kind of doing that. It's been going for about 2 years and 3 months now. So what I had is dwarf isopods. I had the dairy cows. I started with some armadillium, but they ended up getting eaten out. I guess I don't know how to say it.
Or maybe outcompeted.
Outcompeted, that's the best way to say it, yeah. So they got outcompeted pretty quickly. The worms were doing great, but they ended up all dying off after I moved because the relative humidity had dropped significantly enough to dry out the substrate. So they all died off, but then they were colonized by the shiitake mycelium. So this is the enclosure right here. The shiitake mycelium sort of took the bottom layer. And so you have what I think is going on is that the dairy cows are on the top layer, and that the dwarf isopods can move more easily through the soil substrate, and they seem to congregate around wherever the mycelium is.
Okay, so they're probably munching in the mycelium, but it's growing and
exactly. And I try to reintroduce the worms. I'm trying to keep them stabilized. I'm thinking about what I can do in terms of like some kind of some way to keep them isolated from the isopods and keep them fed. So I'm still kind of workshopping that.
Interesting. So just the red wigglers. I was curious about
Yeah.
what kind of worm.
Sorry? It's just a.
Yeah.
Sorry, sorry, I have a habit interrupting. What could you say that again?
So the red wigglers, like you can buy at a pet store or for composting.
Yeah, exactly. I just buy them. Yeah, from off of Amazon for composting.
Okay. Yeah. I've used those, but I've never put them in a bioactive. So that's interesting. I guess it makes sense that would be a good place for them to be. And it's also interesting that the relative humidity sudden decrease was enough to kill off the worms without killing off some of the isopods.
Yeah, that is strange. I think I haven't seen the springtails either, so I think the springtails might have died off as well. But yeah, it is strange that the isopods have seemed to do fine. And I was worried about that with them knowing that they have gills, right? I'm not like I knew nothing about isopods basically before I started this. So
yeah, they're often called lungs. They're often called gills. They're sort of they're descended from gills, directly descended from gills, and can be called gills or lungs really at this point because they are adapted for air breathing. But yeah, they do of course require that humidity to a certain extent. Porcella laevis is actually fairly drought tolerant. Not that they can dry out completely, but it kind of makes sense that the Porcella laevis would survive something the worms couldn't handle.
Right.
And since you've got that deep layer with the mycelium down at the bottom, it makes sense that the dwarf whites would do well down there.
Right.
And there's an interesting thing that Smugbug, I heard talk about this, that if you put dwarf whites and dairy cows together, often the dwarf whites will actually get outcompeted by the dairy cow because dairy cows will hunt and eat the dwarf whites.
Okay, wow. Yeah, I haven't seen that, but
But they seem to be separated because they're down there with the mycelium.
Not so much actually. There is some overlap there, but I just that's just how I think they've managed to not outcompete each other to this point.
That kind of makes sense, yeah. Oh, we've got a question from Apex Geckos here.
Sure.
Says, been thinking of getting some Silisticus convexus Ukraine pie. Do you think they could have a steady colony in a leopard gecko terrarium with water stations? Probably. They tend to be burrowers, and as long as the leopard gecko isn't super excited about eating them, then they'll probably be okay. What I would highly suggest is setting up a separate Ukraine pied culture dedicated to just Ukraine pied, and then seeding your leopard gecko colony or your leopard gecko enclosure from that colony, and doing it periodically over a period of several months. Like I'm going to put 12 in this month, 12 in the next month, or 20 at a time, something like that. But as long as they have those hydration stations, yeah, I think you have a pretty good chance of getting that to work. Yes. So Heather Jensen wants to know, Alex, how you got those shiitake mushroom spores to germinate. Did you know anything special?
I just, honestly, I just threw some plugs in there, a plug in each corner, and just happened to work out. I knew that with the substrate I was making that there wouldn't be anything else in there because it was just the standard, Cleanse Reptiles guide. So that's all of that's sterile basically. So I know there wouldn't be anything that would outcompete it. And the reason I put the shiitake in there is because I heard that some of the plants they introduced can be carrying fungus. And I figured that shiitake probably wouldn't be as dangerous as some random. I figured, better to but figured it would be better to have something that I know that's in there colonizing it than just have some random mold that I don't know.
Okay. Yeah.
Know what it is.
Makes a lot of sense. Yeah. And it might as well be something safe.
Exactly. Better the devil, I think that's the phrase.
Right. Evan G says he inoculated a brand new paludarium with pink oyster mycelium. It's kind of the same idea, I guess. So with the plugs, you just drop them on the surface?
No, I buried them.
Because
plugs are meant to be drilled into logs, fallen logs, basically. So, and then sealed over so that they colonize the wood structure in there.
Oh, okay.
So I figured you just keep it buried. I figured worst case scenario, nothing would happen.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And it turned out to be good not to have a bunch of rotting worms in there, but it was able to, just so you wouldn't have any kind of random bacteria and stuff like that kill the whole system.
Yeah, that makes sense. Fungus is pretty opportunistic. So
yeah,
makes sense. So I've worked a little bit with Portobello. I don't know all the terms about it, but I had a friend of mine give me a chunk of wood that had been inoculated with Portobello mushrooms, and we put that in the garage and let it grow and harvested the mushrooms for a while and stuff like that. And that was years ago, and that was fun. That,
Yeah.
that had been my extent of my experience with it. But then Peter from Bugs in Cyberspace sent me some kimchi, which was oyster mushroom myself. And that's been fun. My isopods and millipedes and my beetles, specifically my well, a lot of my beetles like it, but the ones I'm thinking of are the diabolical ironclad beetles really like it, and my millipedes. Those are the ones that really love it. So Ian Alicia is wondering if the mycelium would be a competitor with the springtails. I'm kind of thinking the springtails would actually be feeding on.
Yeah, I would think the springtails would eat the mycelium.
Yeah, so the springtails would actually be predating the mycelium, but possibly not enough to cause a lot of damage with the speed of how the mycelium grows. Because in the wild, a lot of times what's happening is springtails have a symbiotic and beneficial symbiotic mutualism with the mycelia that are the mycorrhizae that are working with the trees. So the trees and the mycorrhizae have a symbiotic mutualism where the mycorrhizae are helping the trees draw up water, and the trees are sharing nutrients, sugars specifically with the mycorrhizae. And the springtails are nibbling at the tips of the mycorrhizae, which makes them split off and grow more.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
So that could be what would happen in a vivarium if you had everything set up right.
Right. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, and I haven't had any kind of fruiting or pinning, anything like that. Obviously, with the amount of predation that's going on from various sources,
which is probably exactly how you want it in this particular.
Basically, yeah. I mean, if a mushroom popped up, I'm not expecting that with the isopods the way they are. But I wouldn't cry, I guess.
Yeah. Do you notice as far as the crested gecko with uneaten food or sheds or feces? Do you notice it all going, or do you notice?
Pretty much. I saw a little piece of stuck shed a couple weeks ago, but that was it's very rare to see, especially shed. But sometimes I see some droppings. But lately they've been going like crazy too. I also had a grain mite infestation that I've been dealing with.
Oh, okay.
So that kind of has kind of been a pain. They've really been competing with the dairy cows. So, but I think I have that under control. I introduced some predators for the mites, and they seem to have taken them out.
Okay, predatory mites then?
Yeah, predatory mites. Yeah.
Okay, and that, I guess that would preclude springtails too. I mean, we tend to at least discourage the springtails.
Right, and the springtails they've been gone for months anyway, so I'm not too worried about that. At least maybe even longer.
Okay. Mantis God says, I have a mixed tub that I've been going for about a month now. Springtails, dwarf white isopods, germestid beetles, mealworms, and crickets. Wow. Seem to find together so far.
Yeah, some mealworms in mine actually as well. I thought they had been outcompeted already, but they're still in there. So I see one or two once in a while. Yeah.
Mealworms are incredibly adaptable with that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I've noticed superworms too. They'll adapt to fairly dry enclosures, fairly moist enclosures.
I think I had superworms. I had a superworm infestation for a while, but I think it didn't last too long. It wasn't that bad. I think I only dropped a couple in there.
Okay.
I had ants also for a while too. That was real scary, but I ended up getting that taken care of somehow without killing everything else. Wow. I don't know how. It was luck.
So you did that ended, which is nice because once ants get in something.
Right. Yeah. I had some diatomaceous earth and I just used some traps and got lucky.
Okay. So like a ring of diatomaceous earth.
Exactly. Right around the base of the thing, so they couldn't get in.
So they hadn't colonized like with a queen or anything. They were just getting in.
No. There was just they were just feeding off of it. So yeah. Oh god, no. So I guess not an infestation so much as just I don't know what you would call it.
An attack.
Sure. Yeah,
something like that.
Invasion, so it's close enough.
Yeah, invasion works too. So Ian Alicia, you're welcome on the Silisticus convexus. They really aren't all that visible. That's true in most cases, but they are very cool species. Let's see. Got a question from Evan G is getting pink oyster fruiting bodies in the paludarium.
Oh, really?
Interesting. Okay. Ribbity reptiles. Any luck with fully fossorial species like tortoises with reptile setups? Worried they would be too irritated or get nibbled by the isopods. Good question. I haven't worked a lot with I would even call tortoises more terrestrial than fossorial in most cases. But yeah, I have had luck with terrestrial species, mostly terrestrial species like leopard geckos in bioactive setups. They don't seem to be bothered by the isopods or anything like that, so it does work. Let's see. So ribbity reptiles are those random mushrooms that you're getting in your rubber ducky tub. Are they yellow? What color are they? And Roger is wondering about isopods overrunning Pac-Man terrarium and get to the point they can harm the frog. Well, in my experience, I have tried putting isopods in with my daughter's Pac-Man frog, and they're not overrunning it. I put them in I want to say December, and they have not overrun it yet. So superworm bioactive setup. I would almost call my leopard gecko enclosure a superworm bioactive setup.
Really?
And there's tons of them in there, and they do fine, and they're breeding like crazy. Okay, let's see. I'm probably not going to be able to catch up on all the chat here, but that's okay. Let's see. So I wanted to ask you about this. Do you notice your gecko predating on the isopods at all?
Absolutely, yeah. I actually see her. She will spend time just staring at. There's a central location where I used to feed her. That's right at the bottom edge here, because she used to just come down vertically and it was easier because to point her face in the food basically. And yeah, that's basically where everything hangs out. And so the dwarves there, she will just stare at that spot, waiting for isopods to pop up or whatever, what have you. But she doesn't seem really interested in the beetles, the mealworm beetles, obviously. Mm-hmm. I suppose they don't eat those. I don't know.
Yeah, they tend to taste bad. The beetles are distasteful for a lot of geckos anyway. But that is interesting that she's hunting the isopods, but they're still breeding enough to do well.
Right. And that's and part of that too is I'll keep upturned cups on that top of the layer, and they'll hide inside of it, and that'll keep them safe for a while. But she's sort of figuring out, I think, how to flip them over. So
wow,
we'll see how that goes. Yeah, I think she did it accidentally. I think also she loves to dig too, so she might just be coming from underneath. But it does seem to help a lot.
Okay.
Whenever I notice their numbers dropping, I just throw a couple cups in there, empty. Or if leftover food, she has something like that. They'll clean that out usually.
Okay. So are they transparent cups?
Yeah.
Big belly cups? Okay. Interesting.
I've noticed that sometimes the mycelium isn't as active as it used to be because the dwarf isopods numbers are high right now. But I've noticed that the mycelium will actually, I can't remember the word, but it'll grow up and fill the cup actually.
Interesting.
If there isn't enough air coming in, because it'll die off in the air. I'm not sure how that works. That process works exactly.
Wow, that is really interesting.
Yeah, and I've noticed that actually it's very good about keeping the soil hydrated too. If I say overwater the soil there, the mycelium will hydrate faster than everything else. Mm-hmm. And so it doesn't be able to keep the soil hydrated. And I noticed when I reintroduced worms that they were keeping the soil hydrated as well. So that was interesting.
So do you feel like the mycelium are kind of soaking up the water, like sponging?
Yeah, it's kind of like little tubules or pipes or something like that. Essentially, is how it seems to be working, like a sponge essentially.
Yeah, so they're creating more surface area and
exactly.
Interesting. I never even thought about that aspect of it, but kind of makes sense because mycorrhizae do that for plant roots.
Right.
So, yeah, that's very cool. So Justinium is wondering what's a good ratio of isopods to vivarium substrate area. Because after a few months, substrate becomes saturated with poo and becomes sludgy, killing plants. I haven't noticed that in any of my vivariums very quickly. Definitely not after a few months. I think it might matter what your soil mix is and various other things like the density of your isopods. If you've got just mountains of isopods in there, that could happen. What sort of setup, Justinium, you're talking about that where you've had this issue within a few months? Because I haven't seen it. Have you had that issue where you get the substrate where you have to replace some of it or it gets sludgy or anything like that?
No.
Not in this setup. So is it the original substrate from over 2 years?
Yeah, absolutely. I haven't changed anything.
Okay.
I haven't reintroduced really anything. It's just kind of going on its own.
Not even leaf litter?
No. Well, I've had to replace a couple of the plants because from overwatering, basically, especially with using succulents and especially on that bottom layer with the mycelium the way it is. Mm-hmm. It tend to I think it basically strangled out the roots that were down there. So right now I have the what is that, an ice plant? I have it in a pot. Still, I just leave it in the pot and put it in there so that the mycelium can't colonize the whole deal.
Okay, so the mycelium seems to be out competing plants.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. With the amount of spores that I put in, I'm not that surprised, and the amount of food it had with all those worms. But yeah, I've never had any problem with sludge. The worms might help with that too. There's like I said, there's a lot of factors with my enclosure, so there could be a lot of things going on. But the mycelium does seem to help with a lot of that.
Yeah, the mitigating effect of the mycelium is a really fascinating aspect here. I'm kind of excited to play with it. I might try with the oyster mushroom mycelium that I have in the kimchi. And, I've been introducing it into isopod enclosures too, but I might put it in some on Bioactive and see what happens.
Yeah.
Might be kind of cool to play around with.
Right.
Yeah. So how big is the enclosure that we've got up there? I can kind of see it, but it's a little bit in the dark.
Yeah, there used to be a light there that burned out. It's just whatever the basic smallest. I think it's a 10-gallon, whatever it is.
Okay, so it's like 18 tall and 12 by 12. Okay.
Yep, 12 by 12. Yeah, exactly.
And that's pretty cool. That's not a large enclosure, but it's pretty cool that you've got that ecosystem going in there.
Yeah, I dig it. I don't know. Like I said, I just wanted something. I wanted to more emulate the natural. What you find out in nature anyway, a little better.
Yeah.
Mostly out of laziness. I figured, the more systems you have interrelating, the less you have to do yourself. So.
Right, and there's some interesting things going on with the mix that you chose. I think I know that other people have talked about, like BioDude provides BioShot, which contains mycorrhizal spores, and I've added that to my enclosures, and that seems to be a good thing. But adding the actual edible mushroom mycelium is a different way of going about it, and it's fascinating how it has this effect.
Yeah. You're surprised.
We've got some people asking about dung beetles, if they would work in a bioactive cleaner crew. And then 503 said, I think dung beetles might need more dung than a reptile would put out. Could be. And Random T, don't dung beetles use it to lay eggs? Like they wouldn't really be removing it, just moving it around. Well, they do use it to lay eggs, and then the larvae eat it. So, but I don't know how they would do with reptile poop. That's a good question. Maybe with things like tortoise poop, that's more like a herbivore poop, but I don't know. They don't just go for herbivore poop. So it's interesting to see how that goes. Okay, Frank the Tank, I've got an idea for you. He has a question. Sorry, I'm getting stuff appearing on my screen. He says, anyone have any ideas what could have been an old 12 by 12 by 15 inch? Since it's small, I don't really know what would be comfortable in it. There's quite a few things you could put in there. If it were me, I would probably put a colony of very small tailless whip scorpions, a communal species of smallest tailless whip scorpions in there. I don't know. That's what I'm going to throw out there. So 18 by 12 by 12, good for an adult crested gecko. I would say they'll use more space. I have one of them in 24 by 24 by 24, but I also have two in 18 by 12 by 12. So you can go either direction.
Yeah, I've thought about going bigger.
Yeah?
Yeah, for sure. Now that she's an adult.
Yeah,
but
the adults can use more space, but
right. But she doesn't ever seem to want to leave. She doesn't seem like cramped or anything like that. She can still jump around. She seems comfortable. She used to be pretty skittish, obviously, as a juvenile, and she's really getting a little more confident now. So when she was skittish, I was thinking, why even bother? Why mess with it? Leave her in there. But now I'm kind of rethinking. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah, that makes sense. And 503 has a great suggestion for Frank. Spherodactylus, or a pair of spherodactylus, which are very small geckos. For those of you who are not familiar with spherodactylus, very small geckos, very fascinating geckos. I think that would be pretty awesome. That's true. And I think an 18 by 18 by 18 cube is good for a crested gecko. That works well. Yeah. Gives you a little more space. It's like a 12 by 12 by 18 and a half, basically. So there you go. Could totally work. Wow. Our time has gone kind of fast. It's already...
Yeah, well, that happens when you show up late.
Well, it's been really cool, though. I've learned a lot about this interesting setup. I am, as you know, you contacted me because I'm interested in this idea of setups that are lasting and setups that are literal unusual. And so I've never heard of anything quite like yours.
Right.
I appreciate you coming on and kind of sharing about it with us. And I'd love to hear updates in the future of how it goes.
Yeah, sure. I'll let you know when it inevitably collapses. I'll inform you. So,
Or when
great.
you upgrade it to a different enclosure or whatever.
Oh yeah, that too. Yeah. Or if I might actually just move her out and keep that there. Might leave it as a terrarium, or I guess it would still be a vivarium, but or put something else in there. So we'll see what. Yeah. I'll definitely keep you informed if things change or as things change.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on. It's a lot of fun.
Thanks a lot. I appreciate it. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. I've got to go. My daughter has a concert in a few minutes, so I can't go any longer than 6:30. But I really appreciate it. Again, Alex, I appreciate everybody for attending and all the super chats. It's been great, and I'll look forward to seeing you all next time.
Thanks a lot, guys.
All right. Thanks.